Hello and welcome back to the Karma Stories podcast. I'm Rob and I hope you are having a wonderful day today. Today I have 4 stories for you from the Tales from Tech Support subreddit. If you're listening on the podcast, make sure to hit that follow button down there. And if you're on YouTube, hit the subscribe button and drop a like on the video. And my buddy Carmen here might just offer you one of his cookies. I told you I'd bring him back. Anyway, on to the stories. Let's get our nerd on. This story comes to us from Speddy23. Can I have your old IT equipment for charity? Wink, wink. A place I worked in tech support ages ago was doing a computer monitor refresh. As such, we had a bunch of old 15-inch LCD screens that we were disposing of. A lot of staff asked what we were doing with the old screens. As we were disposing of them anyway, we decided to offer them to staff to keep at no cost. The offer was to give one to each staff member that wanted one, and if there was any left over, staff could have another one. This was to be fair to everyone who wanted free computer stuff. One person emailed us saying they wanted as many screens as possible. They said they were involved with a charity that helps the unfortunate. The email said the screens would be really helpful to them, and they would love to have these. Somehow, they convinced us to give them 10 of these screens, when other staff wanting them only got 1. About a week later, it's discovered on Gumtree, basically an Australian equivalent of Craigslist, someone selling 10 of these same screens. What a coincidence! The photos show some of these serial numbers. These serial numbers are cross-referenced with our disposal records, and all of these serial numbers are for the batch of 10 screens we gave to this employee. The employee is asked why the screens they said they were going to give to their charity are being sold on Gumtree. They mentioned that, actually, they never said they were giving them to charity. The email was very cleverly written. They said that they, as in the employee, wanted lots of screens, and they said that the charity would find it really helpful to them, and they would love to have these. But there was no actual mention of giving the screens to the charity, or that the screens were for said charity. It was basically written as, I want as many screens as possible. By the way, I know a charity that also wants as many screens as possible. They were technically correct, the best kind of correct. It was written in a way that you would assume the screens were for the charity, but it never actually said this. We never said they couldn't be sold, and technically they never lied to us, so nothing could be done. It did mean that the old computer hardware was no longer permitted to be given to staff. So it ruined it for everyone. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called Biped Snowman. It says, I think the idea that they would plan this ahead of time so they could try to get away on a technicality should be all the more reason to not let them get away with it. They didn't just ask for and receive this many on impulse. It was premeditated. It was still the wrong thing to do, even if they didn't lie, and they knew it. Another commenter down below called Nibbly Pig said, I mean, this would surely make everyone hate them if you told the other staff they said they were going to give them to a charity, but instead, they sold them, and as a result, no more giving away IT equipment. It now goes in the electronic waste bin. I would think in this case that at a bare minimum, they should be written up for this because they did intentionally mislead the company into giving them company assets, saying that they were going to go to a charity. Well, okay, they didn't say they were going to go to the charity, they said the charity would love to have them. But you can kind of see where that deception is, right? So, at a bare minimum, a write-up, but also, I think these people's support tickets are going to get the appropriate priority, if you know what I mean, from then on. This story comes to us from Snoo80849, Hardware Wars, the Windows Menace. In my last job as public sector IT support, there was this weird persnicketyness to a lot of people's preferences. I understood that a lot of people have been in the job a while, but it seemed like some really took it personal when a hardware refresh was needed. This is about a guy who really didn't like Windows. I fully get wanting to use the OS you prefer, but this was a bad case of, sir, this is a Wendy's via company policy. The situation happened when I was tasked with helping one of the more elusive devs with replacing some 5 to 6 year old hardware. I got the short end of the stick, as I was the only one in the office on Fridays after 2 p.m. I'll call him Cryptid. Cryptid didn't like interacting with anyone, period. He was apparently even hard to get a hold of, even on his team. Even when you did, he hated giving me more than the bare minimum. He even refused to give us any work apps or company email to even talk, saying it was private. It wasn't really, he just hated leaving his nice countryside house to go into town for an hour. Just saying, this guy was a ghost. The time was still peak pandemic, so next to no one was around in the office, save for me and some other grunts. Cryptid was told by his boss to get his new computer that was compatible with their new software environment. The guy had asked his boss repeatedly if we could install Linux. Boss lady looped me in on the email with me explaining it was an enterprise environment and I couldn't give him Linux. We used Windows 10. I fully understand not liking Windows or wanting to touch it, but this was a work laptop, not his home gaming rig. Anyway, I met with the guy at what used to be his desk and got started on getting him switched over. The whole time, the guy grumbled and complained about every flavor of Windows bad to me. I explained again, this was a work laptop and the admins are pretty adamant that everyone has the same environment. He was also playing around on a personal laptop like he was doing work there. It was hard to tell if he was or not. After a bit, I asked him to go sign into Outlook, and he was grumpy he was being asked to do so. He lamented that his Linux client was so much better. I just kept to getting him set up, as I wasn't in the mood for taking anyone's bait. He gets signed in, there's an error, he typed his email wrong, and he just sighs and closes the laptop. He grumbles that he hates that he has to use a work device for work things. He had asked me if he could just use his own laptop. I said it's not likely, given it's an enterprise environment. I did state Cryptid could just limit his use on the laptop to work-only stuff if he wanted to. In that, I then reopened the laptop to get a few other things sorted. He grumbled about it the whole time. I asked for his old device back, but he asked if he could keep it. I said, I can ask, but it was unlikely. Cryptid seemed to act like this was the last straw, made a statement like, you people and your need to monitor everything. Also, Windows bad, and stalked off. I told my boss about it, and was sorry I got stuck with Cryptid and his bad attitude. Apparently, it got loaded onto me as no one else wanted to deal with him, or wanted to come in on a beautiful spring day. Thankfully, the regular dev team support guy took over, given that Cryptid had to deal with someone who really didn't care enough to entertain his nonsense. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called Faith of the Lost. It says, like, I fully respect people's preferences for various operating systems, but he fully sounds like one of those grognards who complains that any change to Unix breaks his workflow. Another commenter down below called Zophile said, I've worked with people like that. I just bluntly told them that this is a Windows shop, no exceptions, and to deal with it. Even when Macs came into the environment, we had some still complaining about using Linux. Those were told bluntly by me, this is the closest you'll get to Linux in this company. Be glad pretty much all your Linux skills transfer to Mac. Yeah, I think there's another way to put this to this guy as well. You can say, hey, yeah, no problem. If you want to do the work on your personal laptop, by all means, you can do work on your personal laptop. It just won't be for this company, because we have a specific environment, and you're going to use that, or you're not going to use anything for us at all. I mean, I understand that people have a preference of operating system, but why would you take the job in the first place if you really didn't want to work with the environment that job is using? This story comes to us from Anonymous589, Academic Dishonesty. School IT engineer here. For an end-of-topic test, a teacher asked for some exam laptops as some of the year 10, age 14 turning 15, pupils have access arrangements due to some SEN thing they've been assessed for. The things are locked down, no internet, no USB drives allowed, no spell check and no grammar check. A laptop hobbled to effectively be a digital typewriter. Laptops go out, they do their test and laptops come back. We pull the scripts and send them off to the teacher. A couple minutes later, we get a ticket in from this teacher saying, it looks like one candidate used AI in their test, that they thought this wasn't possible on the exam laptops, and to please investigate. The laptop is identified, pulled for inspection, and no faults found. Internet still unavailable, Wi-Fi adapter is still disabled by the admin account, No foreign programs found, SPAG is still disabled, as are USB drives. Cheating wasn't directly via this laptop. Next call is the content filter to check weblogs on the pupil's account at the date time of the test. And what do we see? ChatGPT. Export the logs to file, then check DHCP to see if we can isolate this activity to a device. Ideally, we'll get a device name from the IP in the content filter logs. The lease on that IP is still active, and we know from the time of the exam and the lease length that the IP was assigned to this device during the exam. It has the pupil's name in the name of the device, exported and saved to file. Now, let's check the history for this device in the WLAN controller's log. Where was it connected at the time of the test? Yep, it was connected to the AP in the classroom where the test was happening. Exported to file. It looks like the kid got AI to write an essay on their phone, then typed it word for word into the laptop. We send the evidence from the content filter off to the teacher and the head of department and summarize that we know it was their device and it was in that room at the time of the test. We'll sit on the raw data in case we get a complaint from parents. And we hear nothing back, often the case, but we're nosy and want to know what happened. It's not something to leave us hanging with. A few days later, we see an after-school detention for this pupil appear in the MIS with a note attached saying it was for cheating on a test. We caught up with the teacher at lunch the next week and it gets better. They had sent a letter home when the detention was approved on the internal system, and the parents got the kid to confess at home to the cheating. A well-needed wake-up call for the kid. The teacher said they hadn't been taking things seriously until now, and the kid was also cautioned that if they did this in a public exam, they would have been disqualified from all exams by that board, and possibly all exams by other boards that year. The kid will be resitting the test without a laptop and writing it by hand in detention as punishment. The test wasn't one that would determine the grade for the year, but will be shown as an initial fail with subsequent resit and a permanent mark made in their pupil file noting that they were caught cheating on this test, which could affect if they get accepted back when they apply for sixth form. Here's the kicker: how did the teacher flag the work as AI assisted so fast? Well, dear Redditor, for one, the essay wasn't in the style that the kid usually writes in. Then, it was an essay about the wrong poem by the wrong poet, and not the one they had been studying in class. Anticipating a question as to why AI isn't blocked at this school, the head of curriculum asked for it to be unblocked this academic year as they had integrated it into sessions about study and revision skills where AI can be a useful tool. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called TMSTKSBK. It says, "This is what kills me about AI stuff. If people just blindly use it, they start hallucinating too. Gotta read what you're getting back critically, folks." So this story got me wondering why the teachers aren't paying attention to the pupils in the classroom when they're doing their tests, because it should be blatantly obvious when somebody is using their phone and copying things from their phone to the laptop to take the test. I mean, if they spent a few minutes looking out over the classroom, they might have been able to spot this before it became a major issue. I know the student would still get in trouble, but then we wouldn't have to involve so many other people. Again, though, we don't really know what's going on, so I don't want to harp on the teachers too much. I know they're very busy people with a lot of students, and they might have just honestly missed it. This story comes to us from Old Class 1259, Exam Conditions. Reminded by the recent academic dishonesty story, the last one we just read. I became the go-to person for supporting exams at one school. It became pretty predictable after a few years which subjects would have issues and how. One subject was so predictable in technical terms, I wrote the document on how IT would support, but also how we wouldn't support. The class technicians could be a bit loose with the rules, so I had to explicitly state that we would not assist with 2 or 3 very specific faults, because that is what the student was being tested on being able to resolve. It had to be made very clear it would be no help to the student if we got them disqualified from their exam. I was doing some cleanup in one lab one day with the technicians. Student X never remembers to do this bit, and he casually changes a setting to allow the work to output. Otherwise, the student would have submitted a completely blank project. Okay, dude, not my problem. My favorite subject to support was art. It possibly helped having artists in the family, needing technical support from time to time, but I still had to hold my head in my hands when back in the privacy of our office. On one occasion, I get the call, so I turn up and ask them to describe the problem. The students' pictures look fine on the screen, but print out with terrible quality. I catch immediately what's happening and ask the teachers to step outside with me to speak privately. We shuffle out, both teachers looking at me like deer caught in headlights, as is often the case when I speak to them in geek. And I explain, choosing my words as carefully as I can, partly to be reassuring and partly to avoid being patronizing. They are, after all, art teachers, and the student is using Photoshop. Right, so the source picture displays fine on screen, your student has zoomed in on a smaller section of this, and it loses quality the larger you magnify it. It isn't a problem with the computer or printer, the photo itself doesn't have that level of detail to begin with. Like, not only should you know this, you should be teaching it. Their face lights up in understanding, and they bolt back into the room. I am 10,000% certain they immediately relayed all of this back to the student. I've seen students ask them questions about their final pieces with the teacher just 5 feet away, and they've just brazenly told them exactly what to do. Absolutely without a doubt that they did the same for this student. The most terrifying moment though was the day that thing happens where you don't register a noise until it stops. A malevolent silence fell across the room as the sound of fans spinning hushed all at once. I look up, panic attack already flushing my brain with the bad hormones, expecting dark monitors and wailing children. Reaching to my phone to call estates to report a power cut. But no screaming, not a single stirred soul. 24 kids still absorbed in their work, basking in the light of their screens. It's just the aircon thermostat taking itself to idle. I'm still shaking as I walk back to my desk. Alright, so my main question on this one is, how are the students ever going to learn if people show them exactly how to do things when they're being tested? That doesn't work for me. I don't know if I read this story properly or if I'm understanding it properly, but it sounds to me like they're not being taught to figure things out for themselves. They're just being given the answers. And if they weren't given the answers, it would be a coaching opportunity where they would be helped to find it out, not just given the answer. I know I'm kind of going roundabout here, but that's just the way I'm seeing it in my head right now. Let me know what you guys think. If you're on YouTube, make sure to comment down below. And if you're on Spotify, you can drop a comment there as well. If you enjoy daily Reddit stories, I encourage you to follow and add us to your favorites on whichever podcasting platform you enjoy the most. And if you're watching and listening on YouTube, please hit the subscribe button and drop a like on the video. It really helps us out. I thank you for watching and listening. I hope you have a wonderful day, and we'll see you tomorrow.